Kung Fu just was one of the current crazes. It's almost like David Bowie writing a song, you know, and taking a list of disconnected ideas and say, all right, we'll go for flat caps and Kung Fu. How do those come together? And then you start discussing it, and eventually we came up with the North Country martial art of Eki Thump.
And now for first lessons in control of my body, we learned the ritual greeting. And perfect control of our limbs and movements. Every day I learned new skills, but only for peaceable purposes.
We kept saying in the episode, you know, as you do with Kung Fu, we're saying with Eki Thump is extremely dangerous, you know, and had this rider at the end, and you must not practice it because it could actually prove fatal. And it did, because one bloke, a viewer, died laughing. Tim was practicing the Scottish martial art of ODDIE the New, I seem to remember. And the man let out a huge belly laugh and dropped dead. And his wife said, "Thank you." But I think she meant it in the nicest possible way.
With its over-the-top fight scenes and slow-motion cliches, Kung Fu was an easy victim for comedy writers.
Okay, come at me with that knife, Chris.
Right.
What? No, come at me. Properly, come on.
The shout's really good.
No, really, come on.
Kermit, dear sweetheart, it's not like that. It's like this.
Even glam rockers and teeny boppers began to flex their martial arts muscles.
It's very interesting to see how a lot of the movements in martial arts, not just Kung Fu, but in lots of the other martial arts, are still very prevalent with stage movements, because they are very, very beautiful to watch. They're almost like dancing, some of them.
Bruce Lee was big. There was the Hong Kong industry that was springing up. And of course you had the television series, right, David Carradine. And I thought, but there isn't any music, there isn't any music.
It's an ancient Chinese art, and everybody knew their parts. From a painting to acting, I'm not picking from the hip. Everybody was a kung fu fighting.
So many kids were interested in kung fu films, and nobody really understood what it was about, see? So I thought if you put some lyrics in which tells them that it's an ancient art and it was a way of life for people, you know, that maybe they could adopt some of this to develop their minds.
By the middle of the decade, millions worldwide were attracted to the positive and spiritual side of Kung Fu as much as the physical.
Terry Dukes, 28 years old, karate teacher. He was given the name of Sensei Nagaboshi when he became a Buddhist priest.
Well, I think it's changed his way of life completely.
It's a little foreign to us, obviously, because as a Buddhist, we don't know too much about Buddhism.
People that come to study it, a lot of people come to study it because they want to beat people up. And the closer you get to some knowledge of it, the more you're changed, the more you're kind of softened, really, by it. So that it doesn't work that way. You go and try to learn how to crack heads, and by the time you could conceivably crack a head, you don't want to crack heads.
This is how evangelist Dean Blakeney spreads the word of God. Blakeney is a black belt in Kung Fu Karate. He learned it for a hobby, but found he could attract bigger audiences to hear his evangelism by promising to break bricks, slice watermelons in half without slicing watermelon holders in half, and other gimmicks. Karate evangelism has some problems. Despite his strong faith, he once not only broke a 1,000-pound chunk of ice with his hand, he also broke his arm in 3 places.
By far the most enduring myth of the Kung Fu years was the myth of the Kung Fu Superman.
This derelict 3-bedroom house has stood for 100 years, but members of the East Anglia Martial Arts Club had the muscle power to bring it down. A 20-stone enthusiast tackling the outside lavatory. This is not karate, but the heaven and thunder fist style of the martial arts.
The whole allure of Kung Fu was, as in the TV series and the films, is that it's something you suddenly spun round and did. You didn't sort of go out and get changed into the clothes and then come and do it. And that was part of the glamour, that you could suddenly become this super being.
Well, we were coming home one night from a training session at the karate club that I used to train at, and we just came across 2 cars that had just basically ran into one another. When we got to the door was sort of fastened to with the accident, and we sort of pulled that open, but her seat had gone right the way forward under the dashboard. Basically, I did a reverse, a downward kick on the bottom of the seat. The seat sort of fell down, and we managed to get the lady out. I think they thought we were all some sort of superhuman being. They were thinking, how did you manage to rip this roof off? But what they forgot to tell you was it was hyped up a bit because the actual car was a sports car, soft-top sports car. Because at the time, the martial arts was very, very popular. When I did start martial arts, it wasn't in that era, but it seemed to pick up momentum through the late 70s. And it just got more and more interest. And I think it was just something they could sort of, get hold of and hype up a bit, possibly.
There are 25,000 old-age pensioners in Dundee, and most of them behave in the way that we've come to expect. That is, unless you're Mrs. Annie Sweeney. In a few weeks, she'll be 75, and she tends to be rather more active than her contemporaries. As far as anybody's been able to establish, Annie is the oldest holder of a karate black belt in Europe.
Now, suppose somebody were unwise enough to try to snatch your handbag from you in the street.
They'd be awful sorry. Really, they would.
What can you do using Kung Fu? Could you, for instance, kill me?
Well, I wouldn't want to. Why should I kill you? You've done no harm to me.
There was always that sense of mystery about Kung Fu, because in the old days, you couldn't show anybody this new art, because it wasn't a sport. Everything I had done, karate, judo, was more sport. This wasn't a sport. People didn't realize this was a killing machine.
Can you stop me killing you, for instance?
What would you want to do?
Oh, dear me. Where did you get me then? I noticed you got me in the back of the ribs. And what is it, self-defense that you used?
Well, something like that. It's only really to stop yourself hurting yourself by attacking me. You really wouldn't want to do that, would you?
Outside the takeaway Saturday night, a bald adolescent asked me out for a fight. He was no bigger than a 2-bob fart. He was a deft exponent of the martial arts. He gave me 3 warnings, trod on me toes, stuck his fingers in me eyes and kicked me in the nose. A rabbit punch made me eyes explode. Me head went dead. I fell in the road. I pleaded for mercy. I wriggled on the ground. He kicked me in the balls and said something profound.
The way that media works, and certainly the way that media was beginning to work in the 1970s, was that a cult was built up, would reach a kind of saturation level of sort of tabloid coverage, and then there would be a peak moment. Normally a child gets blinded was a good one. And it would suddenly become its immediate reverse.
As the Kung Fu craze grew into adolescence, the myth of the Kung Fu Superman darkened into the myth of the Kung Fu hooligan.
When Chuck Cowan isn't counseling delinquent children at Shawnee High School, he's spending his time trying to straighten them out in a little different manner at a free Kung Fu and karate school he runs. But he said some fears are raised about teaching delinquents how to use their hands and feet.
Trying to get funding, or when we try to ask for donations from people, they said, no, we give some money to a program where we're going to be teaching kids, delinquents, to learn judo and karate. Now they come out instead of with guns, they be chopping their heads off.
Once you started getting the media reporting stories about, you know, this 10-year-old's hands could kill, you had the inevitable tabloid knee-jerk reaction, which is that that which is good is suddenly become bad, and there's no halfway house.
These little darts, what can they do to you?
In the old days, the monks used to carry them or disguise them in and throw them at the exposed part of the hand and the face, cause a very, you know, cut, cause a lot of pain and hurt. But I've only made these for the purpose of a lecture to show them what they are. We don't actually use them. They're kept away in the cupboard, locked away. We don't use these.
People who is not qualified, too many came in and started teaching throwing of stars and nunchuckos. It was dangerous.
You used to get a broomstick and cut the broomstick in half and get some chains, like a toilet chain, and put them on and sort of have little chuckers there, because when you used to watch like Enter the Dragon, well, I think they cut it out in later days, you know what I mean, but in the first time when it came out, you see him with the chuckers and hitting that one there, that one backwards, frontwards, everywhere. It was pretty wicked. But they had to ban it because everybody was doing it, and some people got their eyes, some people got killed.
There was a phenomenon that people were being admitted to hospital regularly for practicing with these things, and that was the perfect reason for the outcry. It was personal injury.
A lot of clubs opened up with unqualified instructors. They were advertising that people could learn in 10 easy lessons, and you know, people, when they didn't learn properly, sort of were only saying bad things about it, and people would jump on the bandwagon, and MPs tended to get involved, and they were starting to look into karate, saying it was vicious. But to my mind, only the dedicated stuck it. These hooligans that you get that started doing karate and martial arts, they didn't stick it. But they're the kind of people that give it a bad name.
By the end of the 70s, the Kung Fu bubble had burst. New crazes like Star Wars took over, borrowing its philosophy from Kung Fu, but its hardware from the military. Even the godlike Bruce Lee was no longer sacred.
I think one of my favourite Kung Fu films is within the film Kentucky Fried Movie. It's because within that film is a complete Enter the Dragon spoof called A Fistful of Yen. And it's absolutely inspired.
What was that? This is not a charade. We need total concentration. Now, once again, this time, we feel it.
It's like, it's Enter the Dragon meets Airplane.
Better.
Those whom Kung Fu had made famous bowed back into obscurity. Yet for some, the legacy of those Kung Fu years still lingers.
I still teach along with my family, but I now own the Blitz Corporation, which is a martial arts company, the largest in England, spread into Europe, and with the Lord's blessing, it'll be the world next.
It was a super record, especially for the time, and its longevity is proven.
Everybody was kung fu fighting.
now been called the national anthem of martial arts. It's one of the all-time goodies. Yeah.
Many of the techniques that you have seen in this program are extremely dangerous and should only be practiced under expert instruction.